Just before I start this, there are massive spoilers ahead. Please don't watch this if you haven't seen the show yet, you've been warned. So, I just finished Steven Universe Future, and I just felt like I needed to talk about it and say why it's such a pivotal show and such an accomplishment. There are a few reasons why I think it's such a gem of a show, with the first one being Steven Universe Future ended in an absolute cryfest, and it was spectacular, while also being heartbreaking at the same time. It was also totally appropriate for the series. Steven Universe is a series that doesn't shy away from crying. In fact, it fully embraces it with all of the characters. This is a show that shows the audience that it's natural to cry, and that it, in fact, is healthy to any gender. It's a show that really emphasizes that it's not actually weak to cry, but instead shows that characters are actually courageous for being able to show their emotions. And I think this is very true. It's very hard to open up to people and tell people how you're feeling. It's instead a lot easier to just keep it bottled up inside. It's the easy way, yet the harmful way in the long term. And somehow, somewhere along the way, we got it all mixed up, and that's what I think is a major cause of male suicide being so high. You know, thankfully, the world is changing now. Not talking about COVID 19, of course, but I mean in terms of how the world views emotions and how it's discovering that it's really important for people to show them. People are starting to open up a lot more now and aren't ashamed to say that they have therapists or that they're not feeling the best on a certain day. And that's great. Towards the end of Steven Universe Future, there was a scene of Steven and Carney's mum having what was basically a therapy session, and it fully blew my mind to hear a show tackling the discussion of mental health head on. It was honestly just so amazing. I love how they handled it. I thankfully haven't personally suffered with severe mental health issues, but for people who have been through those dark times or have been prevented from showing certain emotions, I think that this show is really important because it shows people that they aren't alone with their mental health issues and that they can show their emotions and don't just have to be a robot. Yes, they could have probably shown a bit more of the therapy sessions that took place during the time that Steven Universe Future took place. I know I totally would have been up for that, but I'm happy that they had the parts in that they did. Where do I even get started with the queerness in the show? There's so much of it. I think basically everyone's covered. There's even an Aero Ace character, according to this character artist that worked on the show. Also, by the way, I'm so happy that it's Parador. I love her character. Anyway, I just love how well the show handled LGBT plus characters and how chilled it was about it all. They just kind of existed and people just kind of got on with their lives. This is very important because it's very underrepresented in media as a whole. And coming from someone who's queer myself, representation really helps make people feel better and makes them feel like they're not alone. It's the exact same reason why people of colour might want to see themselves on screen, for example, and why Black Panther was loved by so many when it came out. And this was across many events. For example, there was a wedding for Ruby and Sapphire, which, by the way, was the first ever queer wedding in an animated show targeted at kids. There's a whole fusion thing, which basically results in a non binary, probably intersex character. And the show doesn't feel the need to point that out or make a big deal about it. It just happens. And talking about non binary, I love the fact that this show was actually made by a non binary person, Rebecca Sugar, because it makes it feel so much more genuine. But Rebecca Sugar didn't just make the story, they actually made the incredible songs for this series too. I love the music in this show.
We're making music.
I mean, I used the intro song as my timer for washing my hands for 20 seconds during this pandemic, and I'm still nowhere near getting bored of using it. And then there's the songs from Steven Universe the movie, the ones from the regular show like It's Over, Isn't It? And Giant Woman, which was right at the beginning of the series. These songs are just all amazing and are a part of the series that just made it that much more special and made me love it that much more. Love was a central theme of this film, and as with the whole crying that goes on in this series, this isn't usually something that's explored with male characters, especially in a series. At least when it comes to using love to resolve issues instead of fighting their way through everything that gets in their way. In this series, everyone is more than willing to show love to each other, whether that's friendship love, father and son love, or romantic love. This is a show that is out to remind people that romantic love isn't the only thing that exists in the world, and that other forms of love are just as valid and should be valued as much. It also pushes for people to turn to love rather than war. This is a series in which Stephen, the main male protagonist, literally has a shield instead of a sword and was basically on a pacifist run throughout the entire series. He always tried to not make war, but to resolve issues through love and kindness. And by the end, I could really feel the love between the characters and their appreciation for Stephen, not just fighting them off, but instead trying to listen to them and understand them. With love and a few other things, but never with direct violence until, that whole meltdown they had in Steven Universe's future. He was able to make the entire galaxy a much better place and got what I think is undeniably one of the best outcomes that could have come for him. That made the scene at the end where they are all hugging the monster that much more beautiful and that much more emotional. Because if he had just gone and attacked them all, that wouldn't have happened at the end, and chances are he probably would have still seen himself as a monster, but just for different reasons, and he wouldn't have had that support behind him to then comfort him after he'd pushed them away. The show ended up with all the gems becoming better gems and actually contributing instead of, just being shattered and having their life end there. Also, before you mention it in the comments, I'm not saying that the other characters or even Steven didn't get into fights. They did bubble and store the gems afterwards to keep them safe. It's not as if they shattered them. At the end of the show, Rebecca Sugar had a really nice little outro, rounding up the entire series and the fan base. I've actually seen the video before, but I was so excited to watch it again, and I was so happy that it came up again at the end of the last episode. Because it's just so nice to just watch the whole series again, basically, in one video, and just remember all those things that made it so special. This series was a big risk and could very well have not paid off. But I'm so happy that it did. And as is with what happened in the show, people gave a whole load of love back to the love that the show gave off. And my goodness, did they deserve it. So thank you, Rebecca Sugar. Thank you to the voice actors that were in this show. And thanks to the rest of the team who worked on this show, as well as, of course, to Cartoon Network for having the guts to back a show like this. A show that is a true gem of a show that will live forever in our hearts.